update for you from a biblical and prophetic standpoint. And I want to analyze current events, geopolitical events, economic events, and spiritual events in light of Bible prophecy and the Word of God. Now, the first thing I want to go over is what is happening here in the United States and what is happening in Europe and other nations around the world in regards to the economy. Now, I have said this a number of times. Well, I've been saying it for years, actually. I wrote about it in my books. Are You Ready for the Microchip? The Day the Dollar Died. Intensive research exposing what I call the planned destruction of the US dollar and the planned destruction of the euro. But I want to take it further than that, and I deal with that in my brand new three-part DVD series that you can get. It's just coming out, and it's called Are You Ready for the Coming One World Government? Are you ready for the coming one world economic system? And are you ready for the coming one world religion? Because these streams, or rivers, if you will, of sociological, spiritual movement, the political movement to global government, the economic movement to a one world economic system, and a unified one world religion, are all predicted in the Bible in great detail. In fact, we know that they are coming because they were predicted by the ancient Hebrew prophets and the Old Testament and the New Testament thousands and thousands of years ago. And let's just hop back for a moment to a place called Babylon. And Babylon, by the way, is in modern Iraq. In fact, U.S. troops are probably in Babylon right now. And Saddam Hussein was rebuilding Babylon to its former glory. Daniel, the prophet, was interpreting the dreams of King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 9 and other chapters. And God gave Daniel the ability to see far off into the future. And he saw an outline of world empires rising in succession. And some of those empires were the Grecian Empire and the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire and so forth. And in the last days, we see a revival of the Roman Empire predicted by Daniel. It's called the fourth beast. And Daniel saw it in a vision of a giant statue of an armed soldier, and each part of the statue was composed of different materials like bronze and clay and iron and so forth, representing the strength of each individual kingdom. Now, these kingdoms were the great world Gentile empires of history. And so when we go back to a particular place in Babylon, we see that Babylon at one time was one of the world's greatest empires. And earlier than the Babylonian Empire, going all the way back to Genesis, we read the story about the Tower of Babel, or Babel, where Nimrod, a mighty ruler who was a type of the Antichrist, all the people of the world became as one. Sound familiar? And they spoke one language back then. And modern scientific linguists trace the hundreds, if not thousands, of individual languages that have come and gone on planet Earth to an original language. They all have a linguistic root, if you will. And so when they were building this Tower of Babylon, they were able to achieve great productivity because they spoke a common language. They were unified. So Babylon was a type of the coming one world government and one world economic system ruled by a one world ruler who is a type of the Antichrist. Now, God looked down from heaven and he destroyed Babylon. And a lot of people can't understand why. Well, God, why did you do that? The world came together, and you even said in the passage before you judged them, anything will be possible for them, God said, I'm paraphrasing, because whatever they purpose to do in their heart, they will be able to do because they're unified, they are as one. So God looked into their hearts, and he saw that the great sin of this movement towards one world government, which is the great sin that's in the world today, was the fact that they built this Tower of Babel as an astrological tower, an occult worship tower that would raise them into the stars, and they could worship their false gods, and then at the same time be like gods, elevated in this gigantic platform. Now that was the great sin of Satan, by the way. He wanted to be as God. And that's also the great sin of the invisible elite today who compose the invisible government, and they want to rule the world, but they see themselves as gods. They really do. And that's why so many of them, I'm speaking of the invisible elite, the shadow government, if you will, many of them have deep occult connections. They see or visit spirit guides. They're influenced by occult teachers like Madame Blavatsky. Maurice Strong, who is one of the most powerful figures in the UN, is deeply involved in the occult. He currently lives in Shanghai, China, because the globalists a number of years ago, quite a few years ago, decided that they were going to make China the world's #1 super economic power. In fact, Rockefeller decided that. So when we see modern China today, the miracle of technological and financial growth in modern China is more than just their hard-working culture. They had all the manufacturing from the United States was uprooted and transferred to places like China. So the U.S. manufacturing base has been cut to nothing, and much of the European manufacturing base has been cut to nothing. And China is booming because they have manufacturing there. Now, of course, they pay their employees practically nothing, but these multinational corporations that rule the world have built up China as the world's greatest economic superpower. And I've seen photographs of Jimmy Carter and Kissinger and Mao sitting together in the 70s, basically saying, hey, you could tell that the Council on Foreign Relations was going to bankroll them big time. So, where does that leave us? Well, in the United States of America, as in the European countries, there's a major crisis going on, a global economic crisis. And that is that the governments of the world don't claim, they don't have the money to pay the benefits of the workers, the pensions. There's the potential threat of economic collapse in Europe. It's happening in the United States. They've been arguing about balancing the budget. But you know what? This is all smoke and mirrors, because in the United States of America, they don't have any intention at all of balancing the budget. And we have been watching a charade between Republicans and Democrats pretend to balance the budget. But we have to remember something that is a fact. And you can't understand what's happening to America and Europe economically unless you understand the players and what's happening with the money. Now let me explain it to you as briefly as I can. If you want greater detail and tremendous documentation and quotes and so on, you can get my books, the three DVD series, Are You Ready for the Coming One World Government, One World Economic System, One World Religion. And before that, there's the 3 DVD series called American Dictatorship. the coming event that will change everything. And that's built on the principle of crisis. Now, crisis was an Illuminati and occult principle first, because the Illuminati said order out of chaos, and Marxists say never let a good crisis go to waste. In fact, if you don't have a crisis, manufacture a crisis, because the crisis becomes an organizing principle that can move a population or a nation in a radically different direction, because they are experiencing extraordinary pressure, and in their desperation they're psychologically imbalanced, and they will give up their rights and they will give up their nations for, a bowl of porridge and a cup of water. So we look at this budget deal, and we see that the Republicans and the Democrats are working for the same master, the Council on Foreign Relations. It's just that the Republicans, and there are many notable exceptions, by the way, I'm not saying all Republicans, and I do think you should vote, but the establishment Republicans are they're working for the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberg Group and the shadow government and the international bankers. Don't kid yourself. They're not working for you, we the people. They're working for them. They're working for their masters. They're working for the ones who put them in office. So when you see through the smoke screen of what was apparently an attempt to balance the budget and all the political theater that went along with it, you see this. You see that number one is our nation would never go into default, because when we are in economic trouble, we simply print more money. So default was never an option. Number two is, after all this haggling and grandstanding, we're still going trillions of dollars into debt, and there is no real restraint, a mere token restraint on our spending. So the runaway railroad train, the crazy train, if you will, is barreling down the track uncontrolled, not controlled at all. So nothing has happened. We're still plunging over the abyss economically. And that movement to plunge over the abyss economically is a planned event. And if you don't understand that, then you need to take the time to do some homework and get out a pencil and a calculator if you need to, and just look at some of the leading economic indicators, and it will be apparent to you that there's no intention not to get in debt. America is going to continue to borrow trillions of dollars. Now you say, well, why would they do that? Well, in order to understand why they would do that, you have to understand who really controls America. In 1913, a group of international bankers met on Jekyll Island, and Christmas Eve, when Americans weren't paying attention, and by the way, the follow-up meetings for these budget talks are going to happen Thanksgiving Eve and Christmas Eve again. So they like to do things in the dark, because what they're doing is dishonest, and they know the American people are not going to pay attention if they do it late at night, Christmas Eve or Thanksgiving Eve. So what they have in mind is this: the owners of America are not we the people. That ceased to be in 1913. Thomas Jefferson warned specifically against this, as did Washington. A group of international bankers illegally took over the monetary supply of the United States of America. It was called the Federal Reserve System. They're not federal. They have no accountability to the government. We and the government have no right to know who their membership consists of. We have no right to know what they've done with their money, how much they have of their money. They're completely autonomous, and we have no legal right whatsoever to know anything about them. So I used to do all these big-time cable news network news shows, the big ones. And when I say the big ones, I mean the very biggest of ones. And I was on these programs hundreds of times debating leading economists and the chief editors of the biggest financial publications in the world. And it was obvious to me that there were some unspoken rules. And one of the unspoken rules was that you didn't talk about the Federal Reserve. And I'm not sure that most of the people that I talked to had any idea what the Federal Reserve was, which made them pretty ignorant economists. So